I like how you're wearing your shirt. It's like the band on stage. It's like
This is what I felt like wearing today. I had to wear my own shirt.
It's like if Kiss was wearing Kiss shirts while they were playing their concert.
Could you imagine that over Gene Simmons' full body armor that he has? He's just wearing a Kiss shirt.
He's like, hey, have you checked out Kiss Has Coffins? And his voice is so slow and
that was
deep.
Perfect.
He's like, and you know, if you're going to be buried in something, might as well be Kiss.
Welcome back to another episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. I'm your host, Perry. And this week we've got somebody who is a first-time guest but longtime friend of the podcast. It's John Edwards from Dads Drinking Bourbon. Hi, John.
Hi, Pear Bear.
Hi.
It's Gene Simmons here.
Wow, Gene Simmons is on the show now.
Perry, I'm very, very, very excited. I think you and I go way, way back. I remember the This Is My Bourbon podcast from the beginning and have been a fan of you and everything all along. It's been amazing to see the stuff that you did in the beginning, from the supposed giggle fests to the amazing guests that you have on now. I mean, your interviews with Dixon Dedman, Marianne Barnes, all the events you get to do. I love watching you just kind of mature in this whole podcasting thing, and I'm honored to call you a friend and a brother. So thank you very, very much for having me on your show.
We're 20 seconds in, and you're going to make me cry. So.
Oh, well, it's you being your friend just fills me up with so much joy that sometimes I have tears of joy. And after a long, long day with a 3-year-old toddler that has been bossing me around, to see your smiling face is just such a joy. And I gotta say, it's great to spend some time with you drinking. I mean, man. you knew I had a tough day when I said, I mean, number one, we couldn't agree on something to drink, and number two, I brought like 5 things and said, okay, pick one. And one of them is almost 150 proof. So know I had, and I said, by the way, I'm not having a Glencairn. I brought a mason jar.
Mason jar.
to drink everything out of.
It's just perfect. It's just perfect.
It's one of those weekends. Sorry.
I want to say something too, that we have, it's interesting because I didn't know this about you until we started talking and becoming friends and everything. And you are drinking right out of that mason jar, and that's just the best.
Heck yeah.
But you have Lexington connections too.
Oh,
went to
very
UK.
much so.
Yeah.
UK grad. I was general manager at WRFL, the campus station there. I did ESPN radio and the Horse Racing Radio Network and Super Talk 96.1. I was the ops manager of ESPN and Super Talk, did a morning news show, produced the afternoon sports show, the pre and post game for Kentucky football and basketball. I hosted that, did stuff on the Horse Racing Radio Network, both on air and producing and affiliate relations and all sorts of stuff like that. So spent a lot of the best years of my life in Lexington, Kentucky. Loved it there. Bleed blue very, very, very much.
There you go. Better than orange.
I have my UK license plate down here in Tennessee.
Do you really?
I have Tennessee. Thankfully, they have a license plate and you can get the UK logo on it. So.
Oh, nice. That is
not
good.
the new one that sucks. I hate how they changed the UK to make it, and it's the way the UK is. It's like the block lettering, like the University of Houston. I wish they would go back to the old UK. Like, I know it's a graphic design thing, and Perry, this is up your alley, but I hate the new UK logo. You're going to tell me a reason why it's good. but
No, I mean, I could go on about it for a long time, but you know, when it was first introduced, there was this notion that UK was starting to become more of a sports-centered school than it was, you know, like academic-based, which is, you know, understandable. Sure, academics is what it's all supposed to be built on, but if you're really trying to establish your brand as, you know, a university that is prominent in the sports field, I think that, you know, branding yourself that way, the way that they did with this logo, was kind of an important step forward with it. I didn't so much like
but it
the
didn't
read.
change that much from the old UK. What's the change?
It looks. I think it looks more
Ugly.
Okay, there we go.
It's square. The other one was rounded.
I think it looks more athletic.
No,
Does
the
that make sense?
rounded looks more athletic. This looks like it's like boxy and rigid. So what looks better? What do you put on the tires of your car? Are they round or are they square?
Oh, see, this is you're comparing apples to oranges here.
I'm just saying, round is going to be aerodynamic. Square can't move.
I will say though, I did not like the redesign of the Wildcat. For
Scratch or the one that looks like he's out of the 1950s?
The actual like logo of the Wildcat.
Oh yeah.
You like it's not good, man. Not good. It's hard to read. And then there's the whole look. If you haven't seen this before, when the logo first came out, there was a little bit of controversy over what it looked like if you flipped it upside down. So I'm gonna say nothing else other than that. So go and do your own research and tell me that it doesn't look like that. So we normally start out the show with Flying Blind, but because we are in different states, we can't really do that. So instead, what did you pour for your first drink there, John?
It's gone already.
Okay, what
I should
was
pour
it?
some more. It was WB Saffel.
Well, I'm about to finish mine too, so you don't have to pour anymore.
Oh,
we'll move on to the second thing.
I'll put a little more Saffel in here for you.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I poured a JW Dant bottled and bond.
Which big.
We could have coordinated on, but
we could have, and we talked about this. But I'm a big fan of this Saffel. I truly believe. I mean, it's 107 proof. It is a blend, but I truly believe that they could have taken this. Now, I know everybody's super excited for Cornerstone Rye to be the Masters Keep this year, but I think they could have taken this Saffel, made it a 750, and they could have made it the Masters Keep, and everybody would have been happy.
Even if it hadn't been the Masters Keep, I think that it could have had a place within the actual Wild Turkey line.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that end product would have looked like. I'm not a product developer by any means, but, you know, I think that this is kind of, I don't think it's necessarily a missed opportunity, but I think it's an indication to Wild Turkey that they could go somewhere else with a product like this, knowing that they can, you know, produce something of this quality. Not saying that 101 is bad, not saying that American Spirit or Rare Breed are bad, but there's just something really special about the Saffel that could be more prominent, and whether or not it's in that form of Masters Keep, I think that it just needs to be out there in the public, I think, a little bit more, but with Wild Turkey branding as a part of it.
This is still my favorite release so far this year. Period. End of story.
Wow.
Saffel has been my favorite.
I don't know if I've taken the time to really like full on think about it. I've had some great pours. I've had some amazing pours that I have, you know, lauded, and you know, like Small Batch Select from Four Roses has been one of them.
Oh, I like Small Batch Select very much.
Yeah.
But I like Saffel more. And I'm a big Four Roses guy. Love Four Roses. I just think Saffel is very, very special.
I will have to revisit it with that mindset of, you know, how special is it actually? And I have a feeling I'll probably wind up agreeing with you, honestly.
There's just, I mean, if you think about the other stuff that's been out so far, and I put it up against it, it's like Select is great. And yes, I know Saffel's a little more expensive, and it's kind of looking like $100 for a full bottle. But I think Saffel at 107 proof is everything I wish the two first Master's Keeps were. Last year's Master's Keep, I think, was a lot better with that Oloroso finish.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know, man. Saffel's really, really good.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I finished a bottle and I'm kind of craving buying another one. But there's a lot of good stuff that's still coming out the rest of the year that I'm
I'm just saying, as of this point, right? As of this point, we never know what's going to happen the rest of this year. What's the date today? The 14th of July. As of the 14th of July, it was WB Saffel for me.
Yeah. I could get on board with that, but I also, I mean, it's hard for me to, I don't know, there's something about the Four Roses Small Batch Select that I'm just in love with, man. I don't know. Oh, but like New Riff Rye though, New Riff Rye has been one of the best things I've had this year. So I moved on to my next pour, which was an American Spirit Wild Turkey pick from good old Liquor Barn. This is Mr. Bruce's Neighborhood. So
this is when you rub it in that you can go to like Liquor Barn and Party Source and all that kind of stuff.
I'm not trying to rub it in. I'm just happy that I have this.
Yes.
Maybe I'll rub it in a little bit, but not enough for you to, not want to talk to me anymore.
No, it's okay, because then we would rub it in that we can go to Barrels and Brews and Elixir and
that's okay. That's
all
fair.
those other places. I mean, I think it's I think Kentucky, Tennessee definitely has the picks on lockdown in Nashville. Nashville is a very pick heavy city, where I think Lexington and Louisville still have those. I mean, the closest Total Wine we have is in Murfreesboro. So you got to go, about an hour outside of Nashville to actually get to either way, right? Because Liquor Barn is in Bowling Green, which is an hour north. And then Total Wine's an hour south in Murfreesboro. It's like, all right, you want to go to one of those big volume stores like that, you really got to go away.
Right, yeah. So as we move into what is now, I guess, our second pour, I got to ask you, John, because you are in the middle, too, of moving and your stuff's all over the place, what have you been drinking recently?
Anything I have open.
Anything within arm's reach.
I will tell you, I am moving. My family, we are building a house. And this is what happens when you realize, when that day happens for you, Perry. I don't want to be too presumptuous, but if that day happens in your life and, you're young.
Thank you.
You can wait a few more years. You're going to have a little person that is going to have a lot of stuff. And you're not going to realize how much stuff this little person has until you realize how much stuff you yourself have. And I didn't know this, and I feel really bad, but I had over 300 unopened bottles of whiskey. Unopened. And I had about over 200 open bottles of whiskey. And the only reason I didn't open the others is, like you're in groups, you're in other stuff, you might buy 2 of a pick, and then you just kind of put it in the back burner and you're like, okay, that's a backup of the one I have. And then, this whole thing has made me think I have way too much. I'm never going to drink all of this. I'm just going to have a party when my house is done. I'm going to have all my friends over. I'm going to say, open whatever you want. And let's just drink through some of my stuff, because I'm realizing that I'm never going to be able to drink it even in my lifetime, Perry.
Yeah.
So what I did is what I said when I moved in is all of my unopens were going to stay in a storage unit. all of my opens because it's a lot easier to move the unopens that are in boxes. I don't even have to worry about them. And then the opens, it's like, okay, let's drink those down. With the occasional here or there that I sprinkle in. So I brought a Four Roses pick from 404 Kitchen here. I brought the Saffel. I brought Old Bardstown Bottled and Bond. And then I got this light whiskey that I got from Elixir Spirits. It is a Backbone Bourbon light whiskey that's 147.3 proof.
It's insane.
So I figured that would just be fun. Towards the end, maybe I'll have that one. But I will go to Old Bardstown Bottled and Bond second. I really love this. This is one of my favorite things to come out of Willet, to be honest with you.
So I've had kind of a hard time recently staying on board what I would call the main Willet train.
Oh, I realized I missed it. Like the train left the station, and if you wanted to get on Willet when it was reasonable, I mean, I was into bourbon, but I wasn't on the Willet train, and now things are being priced to kind of combat secondary, and everything is a lot higher, and I think I would much rather have. I mean, it's good stuff. Don't get me wrong. I like Willet when I like other people's Willet more than mine. And
yeah, exactly.
I think that's exactly kind of how I feel about it. It's like I really enjoy it when I have it, but I really enjoy it when other people pour it for me.
I mean, like, you know that it's one of our go-tos, but like I would rather have on just about any given day a Russell's Pick over a Willet product.
But their 3 and 4 year rye for $50.
Now that's good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
This Old Bardstown Bottled and Bond at $22. Yes, it's a Kentucky only release, but this Old Bardstown Bottled and Bond, as far as bourbon goes for them, it's it's a 4-year 100 proof product. All the standard things with Bottled and Bond, but I really enjoy it. Whenever I go to Kentucky, I always get a bottle of that and Dant and JTS Brown. It's like, what are the things that you can kind of not get down here, but you can get up there easy and cheap?
I'm going to have to revisit the Old Bardstown Bottled and Bond then. I don't know exactly where it is in this room, but I'll find it.
I feel like I'm giving you lots of homework. Do we
You
have
really
to do
are.
a follow-up show?
We might have to. We'll do a little bonus Patreon episode or something. Somewhere
works.
down the line.
We'll record it down here in a few weeks when you record one with me.
Oh, yes. That's, I thought that might happen. If that's.
I hope so.
I would love for that to happen.
I would really love for that to happen.
Because I was kind of so what we're alluding to is that we're gonna Southern Whiskey Society in Franklin, Tennessee is going to be coming up here in about as you're listening to this about 2.5 weeks, and I'm gonna get to go down and not just see John, but the guys from the podcast and some of you listeners out there as well. So I think there might be a few tickets still left for it, but I don't know. I'll put a link in the description of this episode for you to find out one way or another.
Perry, I'm very, very excited for you to come down here in a couple weeks. And I don't know what days you're going to be here, but I am like a mile away from the factory in Franklin.
Oh, perfect.
And so you can, where we've moved this apartment complex that we've moved to, it's about a mile away, while we're waiting for our house to be built. And I will tell you, all sorts of people from Greg Snyder from Chicken Cock, who worked at every single place from Brown Foreman to Wild Turkey. He came by here. Sean Josephs from Pinhook has been by here.
Yeah.
Dan Gardner from Four Roses has been by here. So you have all sorts of people that you are in good company that now come to this meeting room that overlooks the pool at my apartment complex.
Perfect.
And it's a great room. We can watch TV while we're recording. It's good time. So please come visit. We would love to.
We'll definitely make that happen for sure. But I guess like what I this past week has less been what I've been drinking and actually been more of what I've been eating.
You have been eating a lot of burgers.
I had 8 burgers for Lexington Burger Week.
Your face is showing it, dude. You need to hop on a treadmill.
Yeah, can you tell? But like, I went to the gym yesterday, and I could feel my arteries clogged, and I could feel that I wasn't able to breathe as well. And I was like, man, I'm glad that this is not a week-by-week thing. I was happy that Burger Week was over. And
it's when you have to try like a chicken burger, a black bean burger. You have to you can't just go meat. Like, you can't go red meat the whole week.
But I love red meat. I love ground beef burgers. I mean, it's just, look, man, here's my rationale. This happens once a year, and I mean, I probably have maybe a burger a month.
What places did you go for burger?
I went to 7 different places. There was one place that I visited twice, so that would be the 8th one. But I went to Locals, which they have a little what they call one-hander. I went to Smithtown, which is connected to West 6th. Stella's over on Jefferson. I went to
love Stella's and love Griff.
Stella's is one of my favorite places in Lexington. I went to Athenian Grill, had their lamb burger, was pretty good. OBC, I went to. They had a Kobe beef burger with Gorgonzola truffle on it, which was absolutely fantastic. A&W actually had one too, which was really good. It was pimento cheese with a fried green tomato on it.
It's so bad because when I say that, it's so gonna date me, but like Deshays has a great burger in Victoria Square, and
John.
Yeah.
I hate to break this to you.
Is Deshays gone?
Deshays has been gone for a while now.
I haven't been up in if I go up, I go to Keeneland.
But I just to wrap up, I guess what I've been eating, Burger Week in Lexington 2019 was really fantastic. And I'm really excited for Burger Week 2020. And actually, Pizza Week 2019 is coming up in November, too. So that concludes what we've been drinking or what we've been eating for this week on the show. John, I thought we'd talk about something that pertains to the both of us.
Sure.
And, we both do a bourbon podcast. We do something that is increasingly becoming, I would say, kind of popular in the podcast world. But, you and I have talked a lot about how we kind of have fairly similar approaches to the way that we do our podcasts. But at the same time, it's not necessarily the exact same format, but we've kind of, not just bonded over, the over the bourbon or over, just our mutual love of this medium and everything, but just that, we're in what I think is a very specific niche in terms of whiskey or bourbon podcasting. And I figured, we'd talk about how we kind of got to this point because I've had conversations recently with numerous people who have asked me, how did I get into this? And I think that's kind of an interesting conversation to step back and talk about how we got to this point. And you've touched on it a little bit, just kind of in terms of your cred and your experience with an audio medium, whether it be radio or podcasting or whatever. But how'd you get here? I guess.
That's interesting. I guess for me, it all started when we did have my daughter, and I wasn't able to kind of go out the way that we used to, and the way that Dads Drinking Bourbon started. It was originally actually a blog. And anybody who has listened to our show, I couldn't get Zeke to actually write. And that's no surprise to anybody who has actually listened to our show.
No surprise.
So I couldn't get Zeke to write reviews. And it all started because I had a suburban dad Instagram page, and that started from my daughter actually had really bad colic, and she was colicky, and she would spit up all the time, so I had to keep her up. So when I was putting her to bed, I would kind of prop her up in my arm, and what I would do is I would take a picture of bourbon before I went to go put her to bed. I'd edit it, I'd put it up, I'd write something up about it, and then that was kind of taken off. And then I told Zeke, like, hey, we should do something with this. And then that's where Dads Drinking Bourbon was born. He wasn't writing anything about the blog, so then it turned into like, okay, well, let's get out one night a week because he has a young kid, I have a young kid. And then we started doing the Instagram videos, and people eventually went to us and said, and I will tell you, this is the number one sale for podcasting over videos, is people would complain to us all the time when we did video, like, I can't multitask. I can't do other things while I'm listening to you. If I'm not watching your video, I can't text. I can't do other stuff. So when are you going to go to a podcast? Please go to a podcast. And eventually we went to a podcast. It was just my background that I would say it has to sound good, number one. And I'm not going to do this unless it sounds good. And Zeke at one point was like, well, why can't we just put one microphone in the middle of the table and sit around it? And I go, because that sounds like crap. And if your stuff sounds like crap, people aren't even going to listen to what you have to say. The number one thing is it needs to sound halfway decent. You have to have some good audio in there for people then to kind of take a step back and go, oh, I wonder what else this guy has to say. At least it's clean, and at least it's not fuzzy and different levels and people saying all kind of different stuff. But anyway, that's how it started. So then we turned into a podcast.
I don't know if I've ever actually talked about this on the show before, but
Tell me something you've never told anybody before, Perry.
So I've gone to two different colleges. I guess in my college career, I went to Transylvania University in Lexington for 3 years. And while I was there, I think for about a year and a half, I'd always kind of had an interest in it. I wouldn't say a passion for it, but just kind of, wanting to dip my toe into it, I would say, radio. And while I was at Transy, I had a radio show where I would just basically develop playlists every week, but it was called B-Sides. And it was artists that were familiar to people, or maybe artists that they didn't know, and I would play what would essentially be deep cuts from them. So just for an example, say you only knew John Mayer because of Your Body is a Wonderland. Well, I know John Mayer's music well enough to be able to play something from, his second or third album that you may not have heard on mainstream radio. So
there was no way John Mayer was getting played on WRFL.
Oh no.
When I was back there,
No. But
that was transy radio for sure.
Yeah. But
I mean, I know you are a very, very talented, and you wouldn't say this about yourself, singer, songwriter, and musician, and all sorts of stuff. But like, I would have to play a deep cut from like Chick Chick Chick, or like here's the Modest Mouse deep cut. You guys may know Float On, but here's like Miss the Boat that you probably never would have heard. That's the stuff that I used to have to play on college radio.
Yeah, but my point is that it was, popular artists with, a spin of you may not have, heard this by them before.
Kanye has some good ones like that too, man.
He does, yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's all good. I don't mind. But I always had this kind of interest of getting in front of the microphone, like John just said, yes, I am a singer-songwriter as well. So, I do find interest in, to some degree, making public my thoughts. And there's a really funny little comic strip that I've seen recently, and it's 3 dudes sitting around a table, and they go, "Wait a minute, we're 3 guys with average experience and moderate intelligence. Oh my gosh, did we just start a podcast?" And I at times kind of feel like that about doing this, but I also have a passion for something that I associate with my heritage as a Kentuckian. And being able to talk about it weekly with people who also care about this spirit, that is kind of, it's really visceral for me and exciting. And I mean, every time that I get to record a new episode, or even just go back and listen to the conversations that I've had doing these episodes and everything, I mean, I find such joy and such pleasure in knowing that I'm a part of something that I conceive as a lot bigger than just drinking bourbon on a Friday night, out on your back porch. If that makes sense.
I get that. I think one of the things but it's interesting, the reason we did the podcast, and I forgot to mention this before, is that we know so many people that would go into a liquor store and it would be daunting because you have all this stuff on the wall and people don't really know how to read a bourbon bottle or a whiskey bottle, and they see it and they don't realize that, hey, a lot of these things are sourced from the same place. A lot of these things are very similar, and they don't understand what straight bourbon without an age statement means on the bottle. And I think, when it comes down to it on our podcast, it doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't necessarily matter what our buy, bar, or pass is. What matters is the tasting notes that we're describing. And if you like what we're saying, you might think we're wrong in the end on whatever verdict we have.
Yeah. And
that's where I think that, distilleries sometimes can get uptight over what we say as podcasters, and it's not real. As long as you're honest and you're like, I get X, Y, and Z, people don't really care if we say buy it or bar or whatever. It is, people are going to listen to you and go, oh, I really like that. I'm going to go get a bottle of that. That's my jam. Everybody understands that everybody's palate is different. And I think for us, we were just trying to kind of provide some sort of a service by being very honest, by being very open, and not being swayed by anything. A lot of blind tastings, a lot of, and once people at least trusted our blind tasting enough, we would do things without blind tasting. I think people know that we're going to be honest regardless of if it's blind or if we're having it straight up. And it's, people will come to us and say, I want to find something under $30. What's your favorite bourbon under $30? I go, well, I can't answer that for you because my palate's different than yours.
Yeah.
What do you like? Do you like a rye spice? Do you like sweet? Do you like higher proof? You tell me what you think you like, and if you don't know what you like, go taste some stuff blind and figure out what you do like. Find a friend, find your significant other, have them blind you, figure out what results you got, and then go gravitate towards those. Don't buy things because other people are like, oh, I need this or I need that. It's like, buy something because you like it. If you want to put an ice cube in it, if you found your favorite thing is Pappy 23 with an ice cube, you know what? Drink Pappy 23 with an ice cube. That's fine. Just do it. Just do what you like and screw everybody else and enjoy whiskey.
I think that you and I, in terms of the way that we have approached our podcasts, in terms of honesty, I think that we have kind of the same mentality, just that the conversations surrounding bourbon, surrounding whiskey, should be open and honest, and it should be, I think, really at the core of it, as you were saying, what do you like, what do you not like? If you like something, go for it. If you don't, it's fine. I mean, like Curtis, we've tried 1,000 times to get him just to like Turkey 101. He just doesn't.
Some people have some bad memories on turkey, though. That's the problem.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's everybody's
Absolutely.
like, I had a field party out in Nicholasville, and like everybody's like, I did this, I did that. I was out at this field party, and I had too much turkey, and it came up the next day. And,
exactly. Yeah, like there's just different takes on, and really different stigmas that you kind of associate with different brands. But like, I mean, I am here to, and I hope that, this is what's been conveyed, have an honest conversation about, what a bourbon is or what it can be, or, why you should maybe give it a chance, or, I think that there's something to be said too about having, and I'm pretty sure I've expressed this before, but having bad bourbon, or what is kind of conventionally perceived as bad bourbon. So, a lot of people will turn their nose up at even just Jim Beam. Jim Beam is still the number one selling. I don't mind Jim Beam White Label. Yes, it's 80 proof. Yes, it's 4 years old.
My first time at Rep Arena, I had Jim Beam taped to my thigh. And I might have had too much of it. And I should also mention that I've moved into this 147 proof whiskey. It is damn good. I gotta tell you.
John, can I have some when I come down?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I will save some for you. But my first time in Rep Arena, I had drank too much Jim Beam White Label. And then we also had more taped to our leg. And I walked up the floor, and it was a Kentucky LSU game. I remember it distinctly. And I walked up in my haze, in my bourbon haze, and I saw the big UK on the floor, and it was like, oh! And that's when I knew, because I actually had a football scholarship at a school outside of Boston in New England, and I got hurt. They took my scholarship away, and I transferred to Kentucky. But when I went down and visited my buddy, who was born in Louisville, moved to Boston, I saw that, and I go, man, I'm coming to UK. And it
That's
was
awesome.
just, but going back to kind of what you were saying before, the honesty, and it's like, I think distilleries, if you do it in the right way, I think there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. You never want to disparage, because these are people that are putting their time and their energy in, and this is a job, and this is a way of life, and I know I can't distill it better than them.
No, absolutely not.
That's not it's never coming from a place where I could do it better. It's coming from a purely, this is my palate versus other people's palate, and I think there's a way of doing it. I mean, we had Carol Ann Coughlin on from Taconic, and she was doing a Cab Sav finish. I mean, I love their barrel proof bourbon, and not the 110, but the actual barrel proof bourbon. The 110 was a little bit chalky to me. I loved the barrel proof. Barrels and Brews did a barrel proof bourbon, so good. But she busted out a Cab Sav finished while we were there, and we just said, hey, we're not wine finish guys. I'll tell you right now, like, we can keep recording on this if you want to. We don't have to, but we are the last person that should talk about a wine finish bourbon, because I'll tell you right now, we don't like it. She goes, no, let's talk about it. I mean, to her credit, she said, no, let's talk about it. And we said, as far as wine finish goes, this is not one that we hate, but we're not wine finish guys. So if you like wine finish, you're going to really like this one. If you don't, maybe try it and see if you like it or not. But there's a way to do it. I mean, we know that we don't like the dryness of a wine finish. And for Zeke and I to actually agree on something, that's a big deal. The funny thing is we had Greg Snyder on the other night, and this episode hasn't even been released yet. I bet our episode will be released before I get to editing that other one. And we had Greg Snyder on from Chicken Cock, and they have a beer barrel finished, and it was a nut brown ale. I love like Bell Meads Black Bell. I love a stout finished bourbon. Yeah. I hated the nut brown ale. But it's what I said, and the way that you present it, right, is like, listen, if you like a nut brown ale, you're going to get a whole heck of a lot of it in this bourbon. But if you don't like a nut brown ale, go for their other stuff. And there's a way to present it where it's like, if you like it, I don't love it, but if you like it, you're really going to like it.
It's the if but.
Yeah.
You know, if you like this, that's fine, but I may not like it necessarily. So yeah, I'm totally on board with that mindset. And I hope that to some point we convey that as well, or have conveyed that as well throughout the course of this podcast. But, you know, we're always striving to figure out how to improve this as well. But let's talk to...
I think going back, right, like the thing that separates you and I from other people is that we bought microphones. Like, that's what I try to explain to people. Everybody can do a podcast, and you have to be compelling, and you have to be interesting, and all that kind of other stuff. But the palate, the actual opinion piece of it, the thing that separates one from the other is it's my opinion, it's your opinion, it's somebody else's opinion, it's somebody else's opinion, and that is what bourbon is. And you find people, I mean, Zeke and I, in our podcast, we don't get along. I mean, we don't get along half the time anyway, but we don't get along. Our palates don't align. And that's not a bad thing. And it's almost one of those things, too, where when our palates do align, especially when we're doing a barrel pick, it plays even more. Like, we just did a Russell's pick with Barrels and Brews, and when we were up there, we went through 9 barrels before we got to the first one where we looked at each other and we're like, this is it. And he liked it and I liked it. And when we both like it together, that's when you go like, okay, if we're both liking it, it's good.
Yeah.
Because we know our palates are typically separate.
So I think that most of my listeners know like how Curtis and Swan and I kind of came to be as this cohesive unit of This Is My Bourbon podcast. But it was kind of through trial and error that we were able to come to, I would say, not only the way that we function within the show, but also just kind of how we want to see the show grow and how we understand what the podcast itself means, not just to ourselves, but also to, and I'm not trying to put myself in a position for what I would argue maybe is ridicule or for verbosity, but for some kind of place in the world of bourbon criticism or bourbon podcasting as well. And
this is my bourbon podcast.
I had somebody say at one point that it was equal parts creative and lazy in the name of it. But
I think what people don't understand, and again, I'm interrupting you and I feel bad, but what people don't understand is that a lot of these podcasts like we work very, very, very hard to make it seem like we don't work very hard. And I think that's one of the things that gets lost at the end of the day is like, I probably spend more time editing because of my radio background as I try to take out I take out uhs, so's, the all that other stuff that gets put in there. I try to cut a lot of that out, and then I try to tighten it up if there's a long pause between words, and I really try to go above and beyond to actually edit things. I also really try to make sure that the sound quality is better. So if there's anything I can do in editing of that, but then it's also doing your homework. So if you're going to sit down with someone, it's like research their brand, spend a couple hours seeing if there was any other press on them before. What have they said in the past? Not saying that I'm going to, it's not gotcha journalism or anything like that. I'm not trying to get anybody or screw anybody over, but I want to have the best understanding of the brand that I can before we start going. And then, when we ask questions, I really try to ask questions in a way that, like, I want our podcast to be one of those ones where you laugh and then you didn't realize you learned something. And then at the very end, you kind of go like, sounded like everybody had a bunch of fun.
Yeah.
And then, oh crap, I learned X, Y, and Z from it. And that's
I didn't want to, but I did.
That's what gets me excited. I think there are other podcasts out there that are more of like that magazine show. They're more of that magazine show, that 60 minutes, that, really
absolutely.
investigative news piece. And we like want it to be like MTV's Remote Control, which is dating me even more. But we want it to be something that is it's fun and it's loose, but then you went away like, oh yeah, I learned some stuff.
Yeah. And you and I outside of the podcast have talked about this a lot, in that we're not the, and I'm gonna say this, and I'm not trying to knock the person who said it originally. We're not the NPR of bourbon. We're here because we understand and appreciate and want to, I think, help build the community in a way that, while we may still recognize and accept and enjoy the industry aspect of it, I think there's something to be said for not just the community that was built for even just you and I around bourbon, but around the podcasting world too. And I think that while we may have had the opportunity to meet each other and eventually become friends, I think that we now, because we have this commonality between us of not just bourbon, but bourbon podcasting as well.
Well, it's funny because it's one of those things. I remember there was a certain group of folks that we all followed, and we were up and running at the same time that I found these folks, but it's the podcast and
I was going to say,
great show. And I didn't find them until we had Dads Drinking Bourbon up and running, and then you kind of look around, you're like, oh, there's all these other people out there, and I found them. And I still remember your post where you were like, hey, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. And you actually hadn't started it yet. And you said, I think I'm starting a podcast because of all this other stuff. And then you went ahead and started it, and then you were posting that. And it's one of those things where I think with the background that I have, and I think it's just kind of the feeling that I have in especially in bourbon, I kind of go back to like the stories that people have of back in the day and those distillers. And it was like, hey, if we had a motor that broke, we called Buffalo Trace or we called Jim Beam, and then they brought a motor over and
or even as extreme as there was a fire at our distillery and, you know, we're trying
and
to
people
still
brought bourbon
product.
over to get us through. And that's kind of the way I feel about podcasting. It's like, so when I see other podcasts that are out there, I always try to reach my hand out and say, hey, you know, we're all in this together. I think everybody has a different niche, you know, and if you think about it, like Bourbon Pursuit is going to be more of informative. You're going to have Whiskey Cast, and they're going to be a very heavy like NPR of bourbon and whiskey, because they do a lot of scotch in there too. So you're going to have Whiskey Cast that is straightforward news. You're going to have, you know, Bourbon Pursuit that's interviews, but it's like the 60 minutes of bourbon. You're going to have the podcast, which is very, you know, it's entertainment heavy. And those guys are hilarious. I really enjoy listening to them. And then you kind of have like you and I that we're in the middle. But even though I say we're in the middle, I don't think either one of us steps on each other's toes, because we come at things in a different way.
Yeah, and I have had this conversation multiple times with other people in our field too, that I don't want it to be a competition. I don't want us to feel like we're stepping on each other's toes. I think that, you know, to your original point, you know, I may have, you know, at this point, really 2 years ago, said I am curious about and interested in creating a bourbon podcast. It was never with the intention of being one thing or the other. It was just, you know, I wanted to express my interest and my excitement for this spirit and this field in a way that I thought was unique. And, you know, I like to think that I fit into my own niche, into my own category, as this is my bourbon podcast. But, you know, I understand that at times is not necessarily what everybody feels. But, you know, my hope is that we can all kind of coexist, because why should you only listen to one opinion or one aspect or one take or whatever on this industry? I mean, you know, when the rick houses collapsed at Barton, there were several different takes as to what should happen with those barrels, why it happened, how it happened, you know, and if I were just to say to you right now my initial take, I would have said, "Oh, that's a really that's a real tragedy. I hate to hear that." There are other people who may have said, like, it was some kind of insurance fraud, or there was something that they're trying to build, you know. But like, my point though is that there are multiple different opinions to be had about the way that bourbon is perceived now in the 21st century, in 2019, and on into the future, that we shouldn't have to choose one or the other, or we can all kind of coexist as one community of bourbon.
Well, I go to you, Perry, whenever I need to know what the young people think. And that's kind of your niche.
Hey man, I mean,
me.
I'm the youngest bourbon podcaster out there, right?
You are, and when we are all dead, you are still gonna be going.
Okay, great. Yeah, that gives me hope.
But whenever I need to know what the kids are thinking, you know, it's like, are we, you know, what's the slang nowadays that you kids are saying?
I don't even know in this context what you're trying to ask me for, but
I don't know. There's so many slang. I mean, there's so much stuff that I don't know. as an old dad that
You're not that old, John. Come on, man. You're 28. You're not that old.
yeah, I wish I was 28. I'm talking about, I think Deshays was closed when I was 28.
And you didn't even know it.
And
You were going there for dinner, and you
because
had
I had
no
already
idea.
been out of Lexington for 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, I am. It's something that I don't know if I have expressed publicly, and it's one thing to. I feel like I'm getting a little meta here.
No.
I don't necessarily.
Get meta.
Yeah, I don't necessarily, need to all the time or want to all the time or anything, but like, I understand my place in the world of bourbon podcasting. I, as a 25, almost 26-year-old bourbon drinker, I have a very unique aspect of what the bourbon industry is like, where it's going to potentially go in the future. I mean, I didn't grow up in the era when Weller Special Reserve was easily found on the shelves, even all the way up to Weller 12.
If I told you stuff that was at the Kroger on Euclid when I was in college, and
I'd cry.
You would cry.
I would cry. Yeah.
And there's stuff that you are going to have in your lifetime that I am not going to have.
Sure.
And that's just the way that it is. I mean, because you are going to live longer than me. But I think it's one of those things where when it comes back to podcasting, and we've kind of strayed a little bit here for the past couple of minutes, but I think when it comes down to it and we talk about podcasting, it's like, I am happy for the community at the very end of the day. It's like getting to meet you, getting to meet other people, getting to meet fans, getting to meet fellow bourbon drinkers, people that don't even listen to the podcast but like drinking bourbon. Getting to meet people in distilleries. I always say our payment is our ability to sit there with people that, like, we talked to Greg Snyder the other night, and he was talking to us about the 3 types of things in wood that you're looking for, and the lanolin and the cellulose, and how you would do the way that you would cut wood at a cooperage. So Greg Snyder worked at the Brown Forman cooperage for about 5 or 6 years, and he was talking about the different cuts that you would have to ensure that the grain of the wood stays tight and what you're actually looking for. So you're looking for a certain number of rings in the wood, and that's going to let you know if it's tighter or if it's a looser wood. And then the way that you then cut those logs to ensure that it stays tight, that's all stuff that is super crazy. I mean, it's like, I know that at the same time I have to understand, and this is going to sound douchey and I feel bad even saying it, but like, it is a microphone. The microphone is not for me all the time in our podcast. The microphone, the fact that we set up the website and that we set up the hosting and that we do other stuff, it's then now incumbent on us to give the mic to other people, to let them educate the bourbon community about what actually goes into it. And I think at the end of the day, when podcasters think that it's about themselves is where we go wrong. The show is not about me. The show is not about Zeke. The show is not about Perry. The show is not about other people. The show is about the people making the bourbon. And the more that we can shine the light on them and allow them to tell their story. My job is only to steer the ship, which we have done a crappy job tonight. It's like when you put two podcasters together, I feel bad for Perry because of all the time he's going to have on this one to actually edit it. But
don't worry about it.
But it's one of those things where if you allow them to tell their story and you direct them in a way, because they don't always get to tell their story. There are some brand ambassadors that you just need to go in on a day and say, hey, what's up? And then sit back and you don't have to say a dang thing. Yep. They're going to take it and just run with it and say whatever they want to say. There are some people like that, and there are some people that you have to actually kind of nudge here and there and say, but it's not about us. Like when we interview somebody from Heaven Hill or from Four Roses or from Bardstown Bourbon Company or Kentucky Owl or Castle and Key, it's like our job is just to kind of say a couple things to shine the light on them and step back and listen and then edit it very nicely for them when all is said and done.
I don't know if I could have said it any better than that, but in addition to what John just said, I do want to thank the people who have listened to not just my show, but Dads Drinking Bourbon and the podcast, and Bourbon Pursuit and Whiskey Cast and those Dram Yinzers. And I mean, there are just so many different bourbon podcasts out there that it may at times feel like a saturated market, but is something that we can all take part in and be a part of and enjoy together, just in the pursuit of understanding and enjoying and getting to share the love of bourbon with not just, our fellow bourbon drinkers, but people who may not have experienced bourbon in the way that we do. I would say we don't just do this for those who make the bourbon, but also for those who enjoy the bourbon as well. And it may sound pompous, and I don't intend for it to at all, but we want to share the love that we have for bourbon with as many people as possible. And this is just a very small microcosm of the bigger picture.
You say that, and I mean, just interjecting here for a second.
Yeah.
There are many people that get upset with Zeke and I because they think our job is bourbon ambassadors. Like, we are not an ambassador show. We are a consumer show, first and foremost. And I think that's where people get upset with us and where undue pressure is put on us. It's like, we are not there for the bourbon industry we are going to, I mean, I have a background where I have journalism and integrity in journalism, and I'm going to always present things the best way I possibly can. But don't get it twisted. We are a consumer show first and foremost. We are there to inform the consumer about what they are purchasing. And by giving the distiller a platform, we are kind of, or the distillery a platform, we are informing the consumer through them. Sorry, that's something that some of the feedback that we get, and when people don't like the show, they're like, well, your job is to be an ambassador for the bourbon community. It's like, no, well, that's not, you've missed the point of our show.
Yeah.
The point of our show is to inform the consumer, not to be a mouthpiece for the distilleries. We're not on the take by the distilleries. We don't take a dime of money from a distillery.
No.
We are there to inform the consumer.
while I find a lot of what you said to be true, I think that there is still something to be said about being excited for bourbon
Oh,
and
yeah.
the future of bourbon too. And it's not that you are coming at it from a purely nihilistic standpoint, or just, you don't have high hopes, but like, I, at the core of this, am doing this podcast because I love bourbon.
Oh yeah,
do.
I think at the end of the day, right, for us to be excited about doing it, yes, it's a show for a consumer, and don't get me wrong, it's we're looking at it from a consumer lens.
Yeah.
But I don't think we would even look at it from a consumer lens if we weren't fans of bourbon.
Yeah.
And excited about what's down the line. And then when I say my payment is the ability to sit there and talk to the people that are in the bourbon industry and have conversations with them about what actually goes into putting something in a barrel, and what whether or not you're like what type of corn do you pick, and then how do you actually cook your recipe? I mean, there are so many different nuances when you talk to different people that are working in here. It's like, do you cook everything together? Do you cook it separate, then put it in? What temperature do you heat everything at? What do you actually heat it at when it's fermenting?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think the ideal proof to actually put something in a barrel is? And then what do you hope to get on your proof when it comes out of the barrel? I mean, there's so many different conversations. What's your ideal mash bill? Do you like a red corn or a yellow corn or a white corn? Do you like a winter rye, a summer rye? Like, what are your thoughts on rye? What's your thought on a percentage of barley? I mean, I think the stuff that I get into is a lot dorkier than what the average person is going to get into, because a lot of people are just like, hey, is this good? I like it. It's like, and I'm sitting there thinking about, like, where are you putting this in the rick house? And like, based off of where you put it in the rick house, do you know that is going to lend itself to a specific brand? Or is there something that if you put it higher or lower, is that going to have an effect? I mean, I geek out on Four Roses just because of the 10 different recipes. And, a tier 4 OBSV opposed to a tier 6 OBSV, they're going to be different depending on the year, depending on where they were aged. And I just geek out on all of the variables that can happen in bourbon.
For sure, though. And I mean, I get so excited about those variables and about what can happen in bourbon. And I think that I'm at a really interesting point, not just in my podcast career, but really just kind of as a bourbon drinker and just as a person, to understand and see and be excited for where this industry is going. And knowing that, it's not going to be what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Being invested in that history, but at the same time being excited for what the future holds for bourbon. And whether or not This Is My Bourbon podcast is a part of it.
Oh, I think it will be.
I hope so, but I don't. To get back to what you were saying, this is not about me. This is about the industry. This is about bourbon and enjoying it and being a part of the community and being able to share in it with other people. So I like that we were able to talk for a little bit about what makes not just, our favorite spirit so important, but, what we're doing important to us, I would say. And I love that there are multiple aspects that can be viewed from this mutual point of view.
Well, and I think when it comes to bourbon, there's no official stuff. And, you know, some people have talked about the Moonshine University as the official credentialing thing for Stave and Thief. But there's nothing official. You know, it's like Fred Minnick has made a name just by making a name. And he is the most trusted name in bourbon, you know, for his reporting on it. You know, and Michael Veach and you know, other people, Chuck Cowdery and those folks. I mean, they got their name by being the guys who were there. And I think they were there in a, you know, in a written medium. And the folks that are there from an audio medium, I mean, I think that's more of, there was nobody that was really carving the path for bourbon podcasters 3-4 years ago when things kind of got going. I mean, it's like you could say Pursuit was there, but you know, they were kind of early on, and I don't think it was and it was very important for me kind of when we started is we didn't want to have the same voice as other people, and it was always trying to find a way that we were different and you know, how do we actually not copy somebody else that's out there? But
yeah,
I think the thing with bourbon is there's not a lot to be said about it, even when it comes to distillers and distilling. There's not like a test that you do to become a master distiller. It's just all of a sudden they say like, hey, guess what, Perry? You've been working here for 10 years. You're a master distiller now. And you're like, I am? Cool. Like, that's great. But I think that's the craziest thing about bourbon is like there's not set rules and guidelines, with the exception of has to be 51% corn, can't go in the barrel more than 125 proof, can't come out of the barrel more than 160 proof. You know, bottled and bond has to be distilled in the same distilling season at the same distillery for 4 years. You know, like there's rules when it comes to that stuff. But there's no rules when it comes to media. There's no rules when it comes to distiller. There's no rule. You know, it's like as long as you make sure it goes in the, you know, as long as you make sure it goes in a new charred white oak American barrel and it's over 51% corn, then like your dog could distill it. You could teach your dog how to push a button on a computer screen, and the dog could be the master distiller. And that's not taking anything away. I think it's. I don't think a dog could be a master distiller. Please,
I'd hope not.
Don't. But I'm saying that there's not that other side of it is not regulated. What's regulated is the juice. What is the actual liquid is the regulated part of it. I mean, you essentially, there are things at this point that it takes a whole heck of a lot of brain power to figure it out. And then you can set up computer systems to do after you figure it out. But it's
absolutely.
But I think at the end of the day, like I'm a fan of it. I'm a fan of the innovations that are happening in whiskey. I'm a fan of how people can take similar notes and have them be so different by trying to push the envelope. Like places like Bardstown Bourbon Company are pushing the envelope. Places like, you know, even Corsair in Nashville that aren't sticking to the traditional thing. It's like Bardstown Bourbon Company is trying to figure out what are different recipes out there and how can I actually, you know, make this stuff change a little bit. Corsair trying all sorts of different grains. I mean, shoot, they have a quinoa whiskey. You have places like H. Clark in Williamson County, Tennessee, that has a black and tan, and they do a lot of their stuff off of brandy still. You have, it's like people that push the envelope get you excited, and the variability of places like Four Roses gets me excited. Wild Turkey coming out with the Saffel gets me excited. And then you have, Backbone with this light whiskey that's 147.3 and it's MGP juice, but it's super high proof. It's like, that gets me excited. There's plenty of things in whiskey, and there's plenty of stuff that's happening that I really enjoy and I really like. And I just can't wait to see where things go in the future. I
agree. And there is nothing to be said about discrediting other people, because it's all in the, what I would say, the greater pursuit of community, or of enjoying bourbon together. So
I enjoy you, Pear Bear.
Oh, John. Before we move into our plugs here, I just want to say, John, thank you so much for being a part of this episode. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll be on your show here soon, because you already said I would be.
Yes. And about...
I inserted myself into your world of Dads Drinking Bourbon, even though I'm not a dad.
No, it's okay. I mean, you are... You don't have to be a dad to be on Dads Drinking Bourbon, and you just have to enjoy bourbon. So I think in about 3 or 4 weeks, you can definitely find Perry on Dads Drinking Bourbon at dadsdrinkingbourbon.com. You can go ahead and find us on Instagram at Dads Drinking Bourbon, Facebook at Dads Drinking Bourbon, Instagram at Dads Drinking Bourbon, Facebook at Dads Drinking Bourbon, Twitter at Bourbon Dads. You can find us on your favorite podcast app, just the same as Perry, Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, Podknife, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever it is, we are on at YouTube, the audio version. Go ahead and find us. Leave us an open and honest review, just like we leave open and honest reviews against any whiskey that we try. Thanks for having us on the show, Perry.
John, I am so happy that you were able to join me on this week's episode. Well, if you want to follow up with the show, we are at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Give us a 5-star rate and review on iTunes. That really does help us out with finding new listeners and new followers of the podcast. Head to bourbonshop.threadless.com, where you can find all of our apparel and merch.
Did you already tell them hashtag Timbip?
Timbip.
Timbip. I coined Timbip about a year and a half ago, and Perry said he was going to use that all the time, but use hashtag Timbip.
If you've not joined the Facebook group yet, you can head to facebook.com and search for This Is My Bourbon Group. There's just a couple of questions to make sure that you actually listen to the show, because, it's called This Is My Bourbon Group, and we want you to be a part of that community. And then finally, for as little as $1 a month, you can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast. There is, of course, no pressure to become a patron of the show, but if you do, you get awesome things like bonus episodes every month. You get to be a part of our Hangouts. That is $15 and over. And we would love to have you over there. It's a really fantastic community. So again, patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast. Please check that out. I would love for you to be a part of that. Again, John, thank you so much for being here this week.
Hashtag Timbip. Thank you, Perry.
He did establish that. Yeah.
Can't wait to do it again.
We will do it very soon. Thank you all so much for listening this week. We will see you again very, very soon. But until then, I'm Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast.